Tell me about your presidential award, being recognized by the White House for the work that you've done.
We are not too late. It is not too late for us to make this positive change, and all of it matters. And it is the way things are going. It's starting to become science fact, but it is not too late for people to start investing in renewable energy and minimizing their fossil fuel use.
Today I'm here with Rachel Arbour, the winner of the Presidential Award. That means she's been given an award by the US President. She's also the founder and CEO of Gaia Scholastic. Before we hear from her though, a quick shout out to our sponsor. I love adventure, and I'm a big fan of adrenaline-filled activities. Living in Qatar, I'm always seeking new adventures, and my podcasts are brought to you by 365 Adventures, a highly renowned tourism company that offers bespoke and tailored experiences for people in Qatar, ranging from desert safaris to kayaking in the mangroves. I'm so excited to be partnering with a company that loves Qatar as much as I do. While my music celebrates Qatar, 365 Adventures gives visitors genuine experiences related to Qatar, something that schools should look into. Education isn't just about young person's grades, it's about the development of the whole person. What if you're stranded somewhere? If you've never put yourself through that, then you've got nothing to compare it to if you suddenly find yourself in that situation. If you're driving out in the desert and your car suddenly breaks down for whatever reason, you are now stuck without water. If you haven't built those skills into yourself, you will panic. We don't want a young person to leave school just with an academic set of grades. We have to develop the personality, the survival skills. Rachel, can I ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. So my charge as a person really has become integrating climate education and environmental literacy into the classroom, because I've always felt really connected with nature, but when I was in school, it kind of felt like this dichotomy of you learn what you learn in school, and then you get to enjoy nature outside if you have access to green space. And something I experienced both in my own education and as a teacher was this real disconnect that I wanted to help dissolve. So I started Gaia Scholastic to help bridge that gap between connection to nature outside of school and the content we learn inside of school. So I'm the founder and CEO of Gaia Scholastic, like you said, and I also work for a company called Subject to Climate. I'm the New York State lead because they offer thousands of place-based resources for educators worldwide, but I'm the New York State lead because we have a hub that's specific to New York State ecosystems and standards. So my job in both of these roles is to help streamline the experiences students have outside the classroom with the learning that takes place inside the classroom.
That's so inspiring. You know, before I came out here, I used to make teaching videos to try and connect the outside world with the classroom, just from the perspective of, the world of work. And I didn't want the classroom to be this, individual space, because eventually our students are going to leave the classroom and end up in the real world. So we have to make those connections. But I just made teaching videos to make teaching a bit more interactive.
It's up to you to add the dialogue based on the video clips that you've seen.
Mr. Ula meets the Ghostbusters in a creative writing task.
Don't forget to use the descriptive devices such as metaphors and similes, alliteration in your writing. That can't be too hard when you've got a cast such as this.
Nice.
You've taken out the Scarecrow, the Joker, and Bane. My students are creating their own superhero, and I want them to be inspired by you, the Dark Knights.
I found it really inspiring that your focus is on climate change, because it's such a big deal now. It's so important.
Every week we're seeing new and undeniable climate events, evidence that accelerated climate change is here right now. Droughts are intensifying, our oceans are acidifying, with methane plumes rising up from the ocean floor. We are seeing extreme weather events and the West Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets melting at unprecedented rates, decades ahead of scientific projections. The scientific community knows it, industry knows it, governments know it, even the United States military knows it. The chief of the U.S. Navy's Pacific Command, Admiral Samuel Locklear, recently said that climate change is our single greatest security threat.
And actually, my students said to me the other day, I was telling them about social media, and I said, guys, you know what? We were a happier generation in the 90s. We didn't have social media to make us feel so anxious. And then they said something they turned around and said something to me which really stuck with me. They go, but Mr. Ullah, your generation was less aware to the damage you're doing to the climate. And that really took me aback. And I said, it's true, we were less aware. Climate change wasn't a thing. I guess because, we were less knowledgeable. The damage hadn't been so significant, or we were just ignorant. I tend to think it's the latter. And, it really humbled me. I said, it's true. What the young people of today are trying to do now for the environment and towards improving our climate, we didn't do those sorts of things back then.
Yeah. And, you really hit the nail on the head there when you said the word anxious, because that is something I have witnessed among my students, is this really dramatic eco-anxiety or climate anxiety, because and I think it's something we're all feeling at this point, is this huge doom and gloom of, oh my gosh, I'm just one person and the world and the problems I'm experiencing are so much bigger than me. But if we can adopt this mentality of I'm just one person and 8 billion people can also have this attitude of I can make a difference, then we can really help transform that climate anxiety into climate action. And I think education is the forum to do that, because we don't know what we don't know. We didn't know as kids the problems we were contributing to, but now we get to explore what problems we're contributing to and what we can change to do something about it. And I think that's really the key, is no one benefits from playing the blame game, but if we can understand how we can change our behavior to enact positive change, I think that can yield some pretty significant results.
Stop whining.
Changing the communication, and that's what we have to do also with the environment. Change the communication, change the way, and give people hope rather than always beating up on people and say, oh, the world is coming to an end, this is terrible. Where's the hope?
Who would deny how inspiring it is to see students taking the lead on enacting positive environmental change for their communities? So that's been my favorite part of this work, and I've just seen such behavior change among both students and teachers in really wanting to enact environmental literacy in their classrooms, but feeling like they don't have the curriculum or the professional development to get started. And it just is it's so gratifying to be able to support students and teachers in this journey and see them turn that anxiety into action.
It's true, it is action. Like you were saying about, it is one person, but if young people make those choices, those conscious choices that I'm doing this for the environment, and my students have told me, sir, you waste so much paper, and I've got worksheets. It's English, is something I have to do, but I've become more conscious as a result of the conversations I've had with them. And I'll be like, you know what, guys, I had a worksheet, but I've uploaded it online. The first time I said that, this boy just started this slow clap. Well done, sir. Well done. You have saved the earth. I said, listen, I made a conscious decision and a conscious choice. And they're like, no, I'm in all seriousness, sir, like, well done. Like, I said, it was actually as a result of my conversations with you about the environment and the positive action and those small choices we can make. Yes, it's going to be incremental, but, it will be a step towards positivity.
Wow. I couldn't agree more. I'm just loving hearing you say that. And I feel like I was there with those students and how they just call you on it and they help really.
They reported me to the geography teacher and said, you have no idea what he's doing to the earth with the paper that he wastes. And the geography teacher came up to me and said, Mr. Ullah, apparently you are harming the earth. Well, I have worksheets and not much I can do about it. But now with online learning and with, with OneDrives and so on, I am now plugging it more online. I say, look, go online, get laptops out, get that done. Because my objective is to have the work done. It doesn't matter if it's digitally or on paper. So I've now made conscious choices too. Okay, so I want to start you off on a question. And like I mentioned, these studious students of mine have actually given questions. So I've got them at the bottom too. But my first question to you was just finding Gaia Scholastic. What inspired you to start it all? Growing up, I remember the environment when I was growing up as a child, we had Michael Jackson's Heal the Earth. We had Michael Jackson's Earth Song.
What about sunrise? What about rain? What about all the things that you said we were to gain? I used to dream Used to glance beyond the stars. Now I don't know where we are. Although I know we're drifting by.
And those songs got a bit of backlash because people didn't want to hear about it. They're like, oh no, we don't, you know, talk about, you know, black or white. Talk about, you know, Remember the Time and Bad and Beat It and Thriller. We like these. Don't go into, you know, earth politics, Michael Jackson. We don't like that. And it was kind of, that was kind of the attitude at the time, that it wasn't something that was talked about. So what inspired you to start up, you know, this brilliant work that you're doing on the environment with Gaia Scholastic?
Yeah, I mean, my original thought was the research I did on my students that I'm happy to share with you, because now it's published in the Environmental Education Research Journal, but it didn't start there. I think I played sports growing up, so I spent a lot of time outside, and I think just I had this really inspirational teacher in high school who got us thinking and doing things outside the box. So I remember he gave us an extra credit assignment to go experience freeganism. So we like talked to organizations in our town, like Dunkin' Donuts was in our town, and they would throw away their day-old bagels. So we would explore the practices of different sustainability models in our town and see how we can, you know, bagels aren't bad after one day. So that kind of opened the door for me to thinking outside the box and understanding what was beyond my day to day. And he really, not only did he have really interesting assignments like that, but his own life was so interesting. I remember the summer before I took this class with him, AP Environmental Science, he had studied polar bears in Svalbard the whole summer. So he was just doing really cool experiential learning, and it made me want to do experiential learning. So then I got into, I worked for the Southwest Conservation Corps. I built campsites and maintained trails, and we camped the whole time, and we were just so in the wilderness, and we would camp outside and see shooting stars every single night. And it was amazing because the sky was just so clear. And then I also did my own experiential research. I studied whale sharks in Baja. I worked with local scientists in the Galapagos, and there's just so much world to celebrate. And once I became a teacher, I really wanted to start translating those experiences to my students. And that's when I realized, we don't have to have this separation of what we do outside of school and what we do in school. And this is a long story, but then once I I had lived in Colorado for a number of years and moved back to New York to be closer to family. And the year I moved back, this job opened up at a public school district, like 20 minutes away from where I live. And I still don't know of any other job like it in at least the States, where I was the director of environmental education. So my whole role was, I worked directly with students, but I was kind of like a teacher admin hybrid, because I took the standards-based learning that was happening in the classroom, I put an environmental twist on it, and then I put it back in the classroom, and I co-taught with those teachers so they felt comfortable teaching it themselves. And that really showed me how much behavior change is possible, like what I was talking about before, because my first month on the job, I knew what I wanted to get out of this program. I knew I wanted kids to connect with nature, but I didn't want to push my agenda. So I just wanted to sit back and observe. And I made this single nature journaling activity for a middle school English classroom. And I wanted to see, it was driven by the ELA standards, but it also had connections to art and social studies and math and obviously science. And students completed a pre and a post survey. There was no pre-teaching. I just wanted to see how they felt before and after this activity. And then they went out in nature and they journaled for an hour. And just from this one activity, students showed statistically significant improved moods, decreases in stress, increased connections to self, others, and nature, even though it was an independent activity. And they felt an increased understanding of their impact on the natural world. And they were fired up about climate change. They just sitting outside during school, they had some pretty dramatic and not worthy and dramatic statements about like how climate change is this our dying contaminated planet needs help. I mean, they were like really asking for help. And it made me realize, wow, kids really want this experience. What can we do to provide it for others? And that's why I started Gaia Scholastic, because the kids were really craving it. I talked to teachers across the country and I wanted to see what they thought about it. And they overwhelmingly believed it was something that was really important, but they didn't have, like I said, the resources or training to implement it themselves. So those two factors were the reasons I started Gaia. And since I've started it, I've seen how much students and teachers alike are really picking up on this type of learning experience. They want to integrate it into their lives because they're feeling climate anxiety, whether we're talking about it or not. So the least we could do as educators, if our job is to help prepare them for the real world, is to give them the skills and knowledge about what the real world looks like and how they can make a positive impact. So I feel so lucky I get to do this. I love my job.
I think that's so inspiring. You know, I've talked to other guests of mine from an educational point of view, and they talked about blended learning, where you're blending the learning across different subjects. The subjects are not separate; they're all blended into one. But what you're talking about there is blended learning, but with a climate change focus, right? And I think that's definitely the way forward, and especially taking them out of the classroom. So Leo Thompson and I talked about blended learning, but Martin Bloomfield and I talked about the anxiety that young people feel when they're in the classroom, that, you know, the four walls, you got the desks, you got the board, you got your book, and it's such a tense situation because, you know, you're thinking long term, your grades are based on the work that you're doing, that's going to be given a report's going to go to your parents. It's anxiety from beginning until the bell goes. But when you take them out of the classroom and they start making those connections with the real world and, you know, the working within nature, I'm not surprised with the reaction that they had, because, like you said, they come to realize things that we've kind of become a little bit apathetic to. Oh yeah, it is what it is, you know. But young people are, no, we got to do something about this. There's that sense of urgency. It reminds me of Greta Thunberg's speech at the UN, where, why have we not been talking about this? You know, we've got to do something. We've got to. It's a call to action from the young to the older generation, who become very apathetic and, yeah, well, it is what it is, and maybe we'll, can't do much about it. And it's so humbling that it's a younger generation that are calling us to action. And like I said, my students are holding me to account. And it's great because ultimately the young people of today are the vicegerents. They're going to be the one that we will leave the earth to, once we're gone. And we would hope that we're leaving it in capable hands and responsible hands that will make better decisions, let's face it, than we did.
Yeah. And I think everyone is feeling this, a lot of people are feeling this awareness, but this terror that I don't know what I can be doing differently, but I know about this larger problem. And if we can each adopt the understanding that what we do matters, whether it's good or bad, then we can start doing something about it in a positive way.
Tell me about your presidential award, being recognized by the White House for the work that you've done. What did it mean winning it? And take me through that experience.
It was pretty surreal. So I won an award from the Biden administration in 2024. Actually, it's right behind me. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
And it was for my environmental work, bringing these types of learning experiences into the classroom, because it's really, so many teachers are doing this from the ground up, but we shouldn't all have to rebuild the wheel. And really what Gaia is trying to do is support these educators who are already interested in making this change in doing it with resources and a strong training foundation. So I won this presidential award because of my work in the school district, where I was encouraging students to connect with nature. My program is all about climate literacy, but it always has to start with a nature connection, because if we start with the doom and gloom, then all we feel is stress. And if we start with, well, why should we care about it? Like, what do you think about that tree? Let's go figure it out by going up to it and sitting under it. That has a real impact where students feel like they have something to fight for. It's not just this abstract thing, it's something they have a direct connection with. And so I built, by the end of my time at the school district, a fully integrated, interdisciplinary, meaning environmental literacy is its own discipline in my mind, and any other content area like social studies, math, that it plugs into, that's multidisciplinary. So I won this presidential award for my work in building a fully integrated pre-K through 8 environmental literacy program. And it was so special to see the way, again, kids responded, where by the end of my 4 years in this program, they were volunteering. 5th to 8th grade students were volunteering to build their own civic action projects. And through this presidential award, I got to speak at the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and I got to meet people who are making large-scale change from the top down. And that was just so remarkable, and it really helped drive my company forward and my initiatives forward, because it was affirmation that this work matters and that kids are responding and that our country as a whole wants to see this type of systemic change. So it was really, I think I'm still kind of in shock about it, having been honored with this remarkable award. And in the same month, our school district also won the Green Ribbon Award, which was through the U.S. Department of Education. And that was also an honor at the EPA. I mean, it was just like, it was like the pinnacle of my career to have been among all these really important people making really important change and feeling like a part of it in this community of climate educators. So yeah, it was.
I mean, yeah, to get the presidential seal for the work that you've done is the ultimate form of validation. And anyone, working in a country, to get the government to recognize the work that you've done, it just proves that the work that you're doing is valuable, meaningful, and being recognized. And like you said, if you started from the ground up, and then you had people who were at the top coming down, okay, and you were then the meeting point between those two. You were the focal point where the work that you're doing is on the ground with kids and with teachers and educators was recognized by those at the top who are making, nationwide decisions about climate change. And I think that's brilliant.
One of the questions I've heard a lot, and I heard from you, is like, where do we get started? And how do I get involved? And I think it can feel so overwhelming when you're on one side of just, it's like starting a new job. Like, oh my gosh, I know what I want to do, but it feels like a huge mountain to climb to get there. And whatever you do to get started is the right thing, because the whole thing is that it needs to work for you and your classroom. So, and that's really what Gaia Scholastic is about, is a curated experience where I want to meet you where you are. That was the way I built my program at the school district also, is I know what is an important outcome, which is that nature connection, but I don't want to just force my own beliefs on you. I want you to feel this connection yourself, because we are all part of this planet. And actually, that was one question I surveyed students on in that research was, are humans a part of this planet, or are humans animals? And before we nature journaled, students really didn't feel like they were part of it. They felt like people were separate from nature. And after nature journaling, they felt differently. And I think that's really remarkable, that just highlights that disconnect that we're talking about of, I'm doing what I'm doing in school. It's very scripted. And then I get to go out and have my real life beyond school. And I think it's not just bringing the learning outside that's important. It's bringing real world challenges into the classroom. You don't need access to nature to be able to integrate environmental literacy into your classroom. So if you're thinking about a starting point and you don't have good field trip opportunities, or you don't have a school garden, that doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be a roadblock. There are so many ways that I would love to help support. I mean, beyond Gaia, obviously that's Gaia's mission, but Rachel would love to help support any educator in any student in feeling this connection with nature, because yeah, when you walk out of those school doors, the real world is still going to be there, and we should know our place in it. Anyway, that was a tangent, but whatever place you want to get started is the right place, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, so we have and many schools have here in the Gulf something that's been brought over from the UK, which is the Duke of Edinburgh Award. So it's to create. I don't know. Have you heard of that?
I haven't. No, I'd love to hear more.
The Duke of Edinburgh's International Award is the world's leading youth achievement award and has transformed the lives of millions of young people over the past 60 years. In today's uncertain world, young people face more challenges than ever, from struggling education systems to increasing inequality and greater competition for jobs and resources. All this uncertainty contributes to a growing frustration that can leave young people feeling excluded from society and unable to find their place in the world. As a global framework for non-formal education, the award helps young people deal with these and other problems and is open to anyone between the ages of 14 to 24, regardless of gender, background, or ability. Doing the award means young people gain skills that are best learned outside the classroom, including building confidence, gaining teamwork skills, and developing greater resilience and problem-solving abilities.
Environmental literacy should be part and parcel of what we do within education.
I totally agree. And that is a real equity issue that you brought up. The cool thing about this content being interdisciplinary is that teachers don't need to sacrifice teaching time to be able to teach environmental literacy. So I think that's a big concern is, as teachers, we're so short on time. Oh gosh, now we have to do an additional bucket of things when I couldn't even finish the first bucket. But the cool thing about this interdisciplinary content is that it weaves into what you're already doing in a way that works for you and in a way that brings the real world into the classroom. So it's just a win-win, because if you're teaching environmental literacy through a social studies perspective, through, let's say, civics, which is you want kids to become involved with civic action anyway, or civic engagement. What if we brought in environmental issues? What if we brought in the UN Sustainable Development Goals and provided them as a framework for students to understand what our world leaders have defined as some issues across the globe? And that makes the learning more meaningful. That makes you as a teacher have a foundation to build on beyond the standards you're expected to teach. And that also means that students are experiencing this type of learning no matter what class they're in. So it's not just reserved for, getting back to that equity issue, a science class that they are taking as an elective because they're already interested or because they have access to that class. Instead, we could be focusing on environmental connection in any class. In ELA, we can be nature journaling or using sensory details to enhance our writing.
Lessons are often made out of what the children notice, whether it be the birds or the bees or something else. Parents notice the difference.
I see how well he is speaking. He asks things. He knows how to speak now more fluently.
All this natural bounty is something to clap and sing about.
What is nature journaling exactly?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because it can be it's a kind of a wide-ranging topic that can be really what you want it to be, but typically it includes using some kind of observation to draw and label those drawings and kind of ground your experience in journaling. So it lends really nicely to English standards. It lends really nicely to math standards. If you're measuring things geometrically in nature, it lends really nicely to social studies standards. If you're analyzing, like, how long has this tree been here? What historical events might it have experienced? So there are connections with everything, but I like to, especially in like urban areas where students don't have access to green space, I like to get like flower samples and leaf samples and little magnifying lenses, which are all really cheap and easy to get, and students can explore nature right in front of them. We can put on, there are tons of YouTube videos of like live streams of streams or of hiking trails or, wherever you want to be. But getting kids remembering that there's a world beyond these four walls, like you said, is just so valuable, because I think, like you said before, it can feel really confining and confusing. Like, how does what I'm doing here connect with everything else? Once we start bridging that gap, I think it starts to make a lot more sense for kids.
Yeah, I think that's really inspiring. I'm definitely going to start. We're at the tail end of our school year now, and I might try and incorporate some nature journaling in. Just because we have literacy, there are opportunities to do that, especially like you said, especially within English. I wanted to ask you, Rachel, about a success story. So, can you share a story that highlights the kind of impact that Gaia Scholastic has had on students and teachers? I'm sure you have a plethora.
Yeah, I mean, the research I keep talking about is kind of my first success story, because it showed me that students are really responding to this type of learning. But I'd say the most exciting success stories for me are community events that bring students and the public together in the name of sustainability.
That's cool. Tell me about that. What's that like, a community event?
They could be as small as a clothing swap, which we did in our environmental STEAM class. Eighth graders hosted and planned that whole event. They could be seed libraries. Gaia Scholastic has a newsletter, and that was actually, we sent it out yesterday, and that was our community. We always have a community component. That was our suggestion, was creating a seed library where we can have this exchange of seeds where we don't need to start from scratch. We can understand what local pollinators exist in our ecosystem. So that's like, those are examples of small community events. We can have things as big as youth climate summits. So I'd say that my favorite success story is, and this actually led me to win that presidential award, was we hosted the first ever pre-K through 12 youth climate summit at that school district. We brought together over 1,000 people from the community, from 19 other school districts, and it had a lot of components. One of them was we brought in guest experts in the field to show kids that no matter what career you're interested in, environmental literacy plays a role. So we had workshops led by these experts in sustainability through film, through architecture, through fashion, and then also things like biomimicry for engineering and hybrid and electric cars. We had live animals and reptiles come. But we also had students step up. And this was where I was talking about those 5th to 8th grade students who created their own civic action projects. Just from this program, they volunteered to take on their own unique civic action projects. So one of my students built, she was a 5th grader, a 10-year-old, built a lasting partnership between the local farmers market and the food pantry, because the farmers market would get rid of their old food, and food pantry obviously, but it's not bad yet. And so that's something that was really inspiring. I had an 8th grader who took on point source pollution we live in the Hudson Valley, so the Hudson River goes right through us. And a lot of organizations were pouring their waste into the Hudson River. So this student created a petition to minimize point source pollution. And then at this summit, I got senators to come and see the learning that was taking place. And so this student got to bring his work to that state senator. And we had a 7th grader who organized a community cleanup event, and then an 8th grader who took the waste from that cleanup event and made it into an art installation. So, I mean, it's just incredible what students will come up with when you give them the freedom to use their voice. And it's also incredible to see how the community responds to kids taking a lead, because it's just so inspiring to see kids advocating for what they believe in. And so if there's any success story Gaia has, it's seeing that change in kids where they are using what they're learning and they're not afraid to do something about it. They don't see those barriers that some adults see. They just go. And our job as educators is to figure out how we can make that happen. And so I think that's my favorite success story is to see the impact of these community events where people come together through the lens of sustainability.
Young people taking the stand and taking the podium and talking about climate change. And of course the senators would have been impressed. Because young people don't do it, they're not point scoring, there's no hidden agenda. When they say we need to do such and such with regards to the climate and the environment, they say it in earnest. They genuinely mean this is something we can do and we should be doing it just right now. And it reminded me of we were talking about that summit and the boy coming up and showing his project about the waste that's happening in the Hudson River and how things need to change. It reminded me of the fourth Superman movie. Wasn't so popular because it came out in the 90s, but Christopher Reeve said, I won't do another Superman. Superman 3 was terrible. And he goes, I'll only come back if the story is good. And he came back with the idea of disarming nuclear weapons because it was, were harming the Earth. And so Superman in that movie decides to...
Effective immediately, I'm going to rid our planet of all nuclear weapons.
And the actor came back because he said, this is a movie that's going to be, for the environment. It's going to be a call to change.
I just wish you could all see the Earth the way that I see it. Because when you really look at it, it's just one world.
And then, the movie pans out how it does, but it wasn't popular because no one wanted to talk about or think about the environment in the 1990s when that movie came out. I think the response will be different now. And, young people are leading the way. Young people like the kids at your summit. I think that's, it's so inspiring. And I wish more adults thought the way that those young people at your summit did.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I mean, I think education is the difference between action and anxiety. And Gaia, I feel like direct affirmation that this is what we need because I'm seeing these students step up. Actually, I do have something to share, just a side note. The one thing I didn't mention was that I had 11 students as keynote speakers for this summit. So I'll share that keynote speech because it was the best. And they talk about their civic action projects.
This chart shows the estimated amount of time that everyday use things take to break down. If just a plastic bottle takes 450 years to break down, imagine how long the new item you bought last week could take to biodegrade.
But that's why I feel so lucky to do what I do. And I don't know of a ton of other organizations there are a ton of organizations who provide resources for environmental literacy, but what I'm working to do is kind of combine forces where our mission is the same. We want kids and educators feeling environmentally literate so they can do something about it. So I just would love to come together and streamline this experience so it's easier for those who want to get involved to get involved. But I think, I'm just going to get off on a tangent. I seeing kids act, like you said, and I think there used to be, and sometimes there still is, this feeling of responsibility and a burden of when we think of our planet. And if we understand what we can be doing differently, I don't think people would feel that burden. I think people would start to act in a way that reflects their new knowledge. So, and case in point with those students, that's exactly what they're doing.
That's so inspiring. So what's next then? What's next for Gaia Scholastic? Do you have anything exciting on the horizon that you can share with us? I would imagine there's something that you can't share, but what's new on the horizon?
Yeah, this has been a big year for Gaia. There's a lot more curriculum development than I anticipated when I started Gaia, which is awesome because it means that schools can tell me exactly what their teachers are looking for rather than me making something and teachers figure out how it works. So right now I'm building a K-5 curriculum for a pretty big school district in Colorado because Colorado just passed what we call the Seal of Climate Literacy. So here in the States, in different states, students can get seals on their diplomas that represent learning beyond the classroom. So there's the seal of
that's amazing.
It is amazing. So in New York, we have the seal of biliteracy, and then we have the seal of civic readiness, which is all about civic action. And that's actually a really helpful framework for students to take on environmental issues through action. But in Colorado, they passed the Seal of Climate Literacy just in October. They passed it. And this is for students to become climate literate and take action, like I said. So what I'm doing right now is I'm building a K-5 curriculum for a school district where their students, it's all interdisciplinary. So it's primarily through the lens of science and social studies, but it connects to a lot of social emotional learning, math, ELA, really every subject, art and physical education.
Students are incredibly busy, but so are teachers as well. But within the curriculum, there is some flexibility. Now, often we put things like PSHE, citizenship, and just to fill those 25 hours, whatever it is that they have. And I think, I love, I taught citizenship, I've taught PSHE, but I think there are more pressing matters now, such as the environment. And I think schools should actually find room in the curriculum, okay? Yes, to embed what's happening, but also to have those focused sessions where the environment is discussed, and there are projects happening throughout the year where it's a call to action, where we're getting young people to become voices for climate change. And I think the curriculum that you're building, I would really hope that you can find a way of sharing that so that schools and educators across the world, because my podcasts go everywhere, and anyone who's watching this would be able to get in touch and say, right, I want to bring this in. What are the next steps? What do I do?
Yeah, I would love to do that. We have a lot of free resources that we share in our monthly newsletter, but I also have, even beyond this curriculum, if people want to get started on nature journaling, I made a Padlet which has the research on why we should do it. It has that research I keep mentioning on my own students, and then it has links to any materials you might need to make that happen.
You can send me that Padlet. I'll put it into this video description.
Definitely. Yeah, it also has the prompt. If you want to use that exact prompt in your classroom, you can. So yeah, I would really love to share that curriculum far and wide, because I exactly what you're saying, having those resources can, whether people know about it or not, is kind of its own barrier. And so disseminating that easier. And that's really why I love working for Subject to Climate, because it is a wealth, like thousands of interdisciplinary lesson plans for any subject, any grade level. And it really makes it easy to figure out, I want to teach this standard. Well, here is an exact lesson plan or simulation or whatever you need that does that. So yeah, really, my one of Gaia's goals is getting the work out there as much as possible, so teachers don't have that barrier of how to get started.
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned, I've got now 4 questions from my students. So these are students of geography that when I told them I'd be interviewing you, having a conversation with you rather, and I showed who you are on my board, I said, you guys will have questions. Here's some paper, pen them down. So they did. So I got them here on my iPad. The first question is, do you think, I did ask them, do you want to put your name next to it? No, please don't embarrass us without shouting our names, but just a question. We'll know what our questions are, don't worry. I said, okay. So question 1 was, do you think climate change has had a significant impact on society?
Yes, definitely. And I think that also brings up an equity issue of some people are feeling climate change a lot more dramatically than others because they can't afford to not. And I think climate change looks really different in different places. So for instance, I live in New York. We experience a lot of flooding now where New York didn't used to have flooding. And that's because our whole atmosphere is out of balance. And I think that's a real misconception. It's like, well, if everything is so hot, why is the winter so cold? And it's when we're talking about climate change, we're talking about a large scale change where the homeostasis is imbalanced. Or there's no homeostasis, because basically we've taken this layer of carbon that normally exists in our ground level, and we've put it into the atmosphere. And because that absorbs more heat, then as the atmosphere gets warmer, it absorbs more or can hold more water. So we have these atmospheric rains that are just so dramatic that we didn't used to have. And it's really that imbalance where we might be experiencing flooding here as opposed to Colorado, which is experiencing significantly larger and more wildfires.
In the UK, I go back to the UK in the summer and in winter. I've experienced long, hot summers, scorching hot, and I live in the Middle East, but it's a different kind of heat. It's a different kind of heat you face there. Then you go back in December, freezing winters. Now, I used to live in the UK before I came out here, but I'm talking about unbearably cold. So what do people do? They have to keep the radiators on all the time. That means that the electricity companies, they crank up their prices because people want to, they know you want to stay warm these months. So now you're paying more to stay warm when the environment, it shouldn't be so cold at that time, but because of the almost irreversible damage we've done to the environment now, we have in the UK, so you've got the forest, like you said, the Colorado forest fires and the wildfires, you've got your flooding where you are in New York. In the UK, we've got freezing winters, scorching summers. Here in the Middle East, we've had extended winters our winter here normally it's a few months, but we've seen it extend. So all across the world, I think the young people are reacting the way they are because they can see the changes. They're right in front of them.
Yeah. I remember, well, actually, we moved from Colorado because of one of those wildfires. And one thing I teach in 4th grade here in the States, we have social studies standards around extreme weather. And one thing I teach is climate change's impact on extreme weather. And we usually use NOAA's $1 billion weather disasters because that's a really tangible image of what weather disasters have cost the U.S. more than $1 billion to solve and what type of weather disaster they are. And so you can track changes over time of, wow, in 2019, there were only $14 billion weather disasters. And then in 2023, there were 28 unique $1 billion weather disasters. So just in 4 years, we've doubled the amount of money we're spending responding to these weather disasters rather than spending money on preventing these weather disasters by things like you're talking about. Okay, these electricity companies are pumping up their prices. Well, guess we're probably getting most of that electricity through fossil fuels. So rather than investing our money in renewable energy, well, now I'm just getting into my own beliefs, which would be proactive long term, where we're spending our money responding to these weather disasters where, yeah, we're really feeling it in different ways in different places, but it is all evidence of large-scale climate change.
Sometimes a film will come out like that film that what do they call them, disaster movies, where the climate change movies like what do they call it, 2012, and these movies where the environment's got to such a point where the world kind of the ice caps are melting and there's flooding and all this kind of stuff, and the kids respond to that as well. But I think those films are no longer science fiction; they're almost science fact.
Yeah, I mean, if we keep, one thing I just want to make I want to shout it from the rooftops is we are not too late. It is not too late for us to make this positive change, and all of it matters. And like, it is the way things are going. It's starting to become science fact, but it is not too late for people to start investing in renewable energy and minimizing their fossil fuel use. And I want people to feel that hope because it should still live.
And governments are taking steps. So there's more initiative now to have electric cars, cars which use sources of renewable energy as opposed to just the leaded and unleaded fuel. And so there is hope, and I think it's all about the conscious decision that we make from here on end, rather than just saying, it's a problem that will hopefully go away. And so it's not my problem, it's for other people. No, it's everyone's. The environment is your earth. You can't. And so when that thing about Elon Musk going to and looking for another habitable planet, I said, that's not the answer. You don't destroy the earth and say, right, can we now let's go off planet. No, this is our earth. It's our responsibility to see how can we fix things. Like you said, the damage isn't irreparable. There are ways forward.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up.
My second question was, what are the issues that persist? Well, it's not my student's question, actually. What are the issues that persist, and what is your approach to solving them?
I think issues can be taken in different ways. One is like the human issues, like what are some roadblocks for enacting positive change? And two is what are some global climate issues? I feel like we've kind of already touched on the global climate issues, but one issue I feel a lot, especially right now with so much administrative change here in the States, is like a lot of this work is an uphill battle when it really shouldn't be, because climate affects it is the only problem that affects every single thing on this planet. There is no other problem that affects every single thing on this planet, living or non-living. And it feels like the fact that you sometimes have to fight like climate denial and that you have to fight legislation to prove that this is important, that can feel really overwhelming and defeating sometimes. And the thing that always gets me through is remembering the community I have, because it's really easy to feel defeated if you feel alone. But if you look at all the other great things that are happening and how we can be working together to build this positive change, I think that is like the strongest source of hope possible, is that there still are people out there right now who are doing something about it, who care. And how can we work together to do something bigger together?
Even Rachel, at the senior level of governments, the governments and those in power that don't care so much about climate change, they're going to become very, very small in number, because increasingly more and more governments, more and more of those involved in the status quo are taking charge, are leading the way for climate change and making decisions that cut across the country, which are responsible and sustainable. And I would hope that schools also, and educators who don't care so much about the environment, will also decrease in number. They're going to be a very, very small minority, because everybody will have taken charge and started making decisions that are, cut across school, cut across the curriculum, and are more focused on the environment and climate change.
Me too.
My final question from my students was, what is your take on everything being done for climate change?
I think that right now it can feel really slow to fight climate change and have legislation in place that feels like it's aligned with acting on behalf of climate change. But I always, I know as a former science teacher and having studied so much science, we are smart enough to figure this out. When we start caring, when it becomes a priority for everybody, not just the people who care right now, we will figure it out. It's just how many species and people we take out in the wake of this fight until we start caring. So I think my biggest takeaway is I am excited about positive change in the future, and I would like to see it happening more. I would like to see us this is maybe controversial, but when you're a kid, if you make a mess, you clean it up. I think the bigger the mess you make for our planet, the more you should have to clean it up. So if you're an oil company, then you might benefit the planet for you to start paying a carbon tax. That feels equitable. And that also feels like maybe it's going to start moving the needle in the right direction when we actually have to face the consequences for our impact. And so I think there is a lot of opportunity to be had. I think we're only at the beginning, but I am really inspired by the people I get to work with through Gaia, through Subject to Climate, and also with my students and teachers that I work with through Gaia and Subject to Climate, because it's just so important to be among people who also care and want to act. And so I am ready to see things continue to move forward.
No, thank you so much. I think that you're leading the way. I think together, if we get more educators and more teachers involved in this initiative, we can, like you said, it's not too late. I think together we can heal the world.